With so many companies that seem to be hesitant to really implement real change, even if they don't want to do it because they truly care about people feeling seen and making people feel like they're not alone, it really does make an impact on your sales when you offer a more diverse representation of who you are, what your company represents. Those marginalized communities feel seen and they will embrace you. So if you don't want to do it because you actually care about real diversity, do it because it will actually affect your business.
Hi, welcome to GQ Heroes talk on diversity in fashion. So it has been a topic of debate for many years, addressing gender, sexual orientation, disability, age and race, but sadly with fluctuating focus across the many years that I've been involved in the fashion industry. The Black Lives Matter movement this year has ignited a renewed call for action, accountability, and in many cases has given a platform to many in the industry to talk about the subject of racism, microaggressions and prejudice. And this, I think, has been one of the positive things out of that movement to allow people to be able to speak out. In response to the Black Lives Matter movement, the industry saw a swathe of black squares posted on Instagram, but what has happened since is where businesses and the industry will be held accountable. So no more fluctuation will be tolerated in the fashion industry. I think it's given cause for us all to reflect, is that what has been done in the past, has it been enough? And I think simply the answer is no. This has elevated a need for robust diversity and inclusion programs, and I'm hoping will create long-term change within our industry. I'm delighted to talk to our panel today about their points of view, about where the industry is, what we can do better. It's an enormous topic, so let's get started. So first of all, welcome to Tam France, designer, TV personality. You'll know him from the likes of Queer Eye, Next in Fashion, and also stylist and inclusivity ambassador for Klarna, who of course are the partner in GQ Heroes. David Sandstrom, Chief Marketing Officer at Klarna. David, thank you for yours and your team's support of this wonderful event, and of course for your support of the British Fashion Council as well. And to Wes Taylor, Menswear Trading Director at Marks and Spencer's. Very, very excited to hear your points of view today. So Wes, I'm going to come to you first, as you're here in London with me. Is that Marks and Spencer's, it's obviously sort of a cornerstone of British retail, one of our best known brands. How important is diversity and inclusion to Marks and Spencer's as a business? Tell me.
Well, obviously now it's incredibly important. Lots of things have been happening at M&S behind the scenes prior to the moment, I think we can call it that. And I joined M&S 2.5 years ago, and I've been in the industry for over 30 years and hadn't ever thought of joining M&S because of the perception of M&S as a business being white, middle class, slightly older, bureaucratic, hierarchical, all the things that you'd expect of an old established British business. And I think it's fair to say the reason I joined was because they made it clear that they recognised that they needed to change.
Good.
And that was 2.5 years ago. Now, it's been a little slow in terms of making some of the changes that we wanted to, but certainly I think there is now real impetus in the business.
And I think is that as consumers, you see the ad campaigns that come out of Marks and Spencer's, and I think certainly they've made an effort in terms of some of the advertising. But has that reflected in terms of what's happening behind the scenes and in the office? Because certainly,
No, and look, I think it would be disingenuous to think that some of the images that you see put out by M&S is reflective of the culture or the organisation. No, it's not. And I think we're honest enough to recognise that. And that the real changes are, like I say, starting to happen. But no, I don't think, if you looked at the diversity that we have maybe on our website or in our windows, in our campaigns, is that representative of the business? No, not yet.
Yeah. And I don't think that M&S are alone in that. I think is that a lot of businesses, and I think British Fashion Council included, is that we had to stand back, is that look at the makeup of our organisation, hold our hands up where change needs to happen and make sure that action is taking place. And I think that every business has been asked to do that.
Yeah.
I think particularly in terms of the fashion industry, where the perception is, I think, particularly through platforms like London Fashion Week, is that we're incredibly diverse, you know, in terms of the founder of businesses, the models on the catwalk, and that I think has certainly changed over the last 10 years. But Hannah, I'd love to hear from you, is that what do you feel the difference is maybe in terms of what's happening in the US versus what's happening in the UK?
I had always believed that the UK was a little more accepting of diversity than the US. However, I'm going to speak really frankly. I think both of them are doing not the best job of really representing the people that inhabit our countries. I'm a dual citizen. I am American and British. And I think it's a sorry state of affairs that it took a Black Lives Matter movement for companies to start to realize that they need to have different voices in their offices, different ideas in their offices, and that the Caucasian way isn't the only way. Do I think we are there yet on either side of the pond? Absolutely not. We are so far away from it. And it's not just the retailers, it is magazines or publications that also are accountable. I love GQ. I love GQ very much, but I went to an event a couple of years ago where I was one of the very few people of colour in that room, and that's a sorry state of affairs. I think everyone is accountable, not just the designers, not just the people who are running their campaigns. It's every facet of our industry.
And have you seen this sort of moment in time as an opportunity to speak out about that? Because I think certainly from the people that we've, you know, the round tables and conversations we've been having, is that it's the first time people have actually felt they've been able to talk about this.
To be honest, so I've always been really ballsy. I don't know where I get it. I mean, I'm the youngest of quite a few siblings, and I've never shut up when I have an opinion that I think needs to be voiced. I've been saying this for 2.5 years. The show that I'm on came out 2.5 years ago. I've not been in the public eye for very long, but as soon as I hit that public space, I've been talking about how ridiculous it is that it took us to the point of 2020, or at that point 2018, to get somebody who looks like me on a global platform. That just seems ludicrous. And even still, I thought, well, maybe this is the time, maybe the tides are turning, but still there seems to be so much focus on Caucasian representation and then some Black or African American representation, but there are many other versions of people out there, and their stories are not told. And so every opportunity I get, I talk about it very openly, and I don't hide my feelings about it at all.
Fantastic. Please keep pushing for that. Is that, David, I'm going to come to you a little bit, because is that there's also a talk about sort of how this whole moment in time, and not just the Black Lives Matter movement, but the impact of the pandemic, is really getting businesses to focus on purpose and philosophies. And firstly, congratulations on your partnership with TAN. I think it's a fantastic partnership. But would love to know more about how you got to the philosophies and the Clothes Loves All campaign, and how that fits into the purpose of Klarna as an organisation.
I mean, I do think that Klarna at the heart of everything is quite diverse. I mean, a fun fact that I reflect quite a lot about is that, I mean, we're a tech startup from small Stockholm, and Stockholm is too small not to be diverse. Like, we need to employ so many different people into our teams. We have, I think, 96 different nationalities here, just due to the sheer fact that we can't allow ourselves not to be diverse. So diversity has always been really at the heart of what we do at Klarna and how we operate, how we have to operate. It's not something that has been pushed upon us from others. It's just we need to operate like that. And I do think that the campaign that we're now running in the UK, the Clothes Loves All campaign, is just, it's a really nice celebration of diversity. It's a fun twist to obviously a serious topic, but it's basically about that, like, clothes are really diverse. Be more like clothes. That's basically the core of the campaign, where I do think that, I mean, the fashion industry is quite known to be snobbish, if that's the right word. And I do think we have a big enough platform now to be able to open that up and introduce clothes and fashion to a broader audience, both with our products but also with our philosophy.
I think you're right. I think there's a huge perception that the fashion industry maybe has been closed doors for many years, and I think this is an opportunity to open it out and to demonstrate the fact that the industry is open, that businesses need to have diverse workforces. Do you think that your team, because you're sort of a relatively new business, do you feel that they sort of believe and are behind the purpose within Klarna?
Yeah, I really do believe that. And I do think one of the biggest differences between old companies and new companies is that we're born diverse. In the same way that a couple of years ago, or still, we talked about digitalization. Like, we're born digital. We don't reflect over digitalization or, to that matter, diversity to the same extent that other older companies have to. Like, they have to readapt, relearn, probably go against some of the principles that they founded their old companies upon. We have a huge benefit being a fairly new, diverse, modern, energetic startup. We have that from the start, and I do think that's a huge difference. And just coming into this panel discussion as well, I've been giving that a lot of thought. I do think the big difference between younger, fresher, newer companies and older ones is that older ones seem to see diversity as an activity that you do, that you add to your, I don't know, marketing portfolio or however you see it, but although you don't fully believe in it, whilst for us it's really part of our identity. That's who we are. And if we are a diverse company, if we see ourselves as a diverse company, we take diverse actions, and repeated actions become habits, and that's how we operate. And that is, I do think, a huge difference to a couple of the fashion brands out there, that I think they add diverse actions to what they do, but they don't identify themselves as diverse companies. And unless you do, I think you're never going to be able to achieve what you want to achieve.
Can I add to that? I don't know if
course.
this is an open forum where I can say what I
You
want.
go for it. You say what you want to say.
Okay, great. I'm not used to not saying what I want to say. Here's my biggest gripe with this is that with so many companies that seem to be hesitant to really implement real change, even if they don't want to do it because they truly care about people feeling seen and making people feel like they're not alone, it really does make an impact on your sales when you offer a more diverse representation of who you are, what your company represents. Those marginalized communities feel seen and they will embrace you. So if you don't want to do it because you actually care about real diversity, do it because it will actually affect your business. And first and foremost, I'm a business person. I'm a businessman. I owned businesses for years, and I wanted to be able to garner the greatest audience I could, and therefore that meant diversity. I wished other companies would feel this way and put that into action.
I think that's very well said, and I think let's hope that people want to do it for change. But absolutely,
I would
the bottom
love
line
that.
talks, and it's a very good reason to make sure that it's backed up by that. Wes, I'm going to come to you because obviously you're sort of at the other side of this. Is that M&S, of course, has been here for years. It's an organisation that has an opportunity to go through change, and actually is one that, if it led change, would be seen as a very dynamic business, wouldn't it? So what do you think the opportunity is?
I think the guys are absolutely right. A new business starting today, you'd have to go out of your way to not be inclusive, to not be diverse. That would have to be a statement of intent. And, diversity, I'm learning new stuff every day. Diversity, as I learn, that's not an action, actually. Diversity is a fact. We live in a diverse world. We live in the action is the inclusion bit. So to be inclusive, to include people, is an actual action. The diversity bit is all around us. As an old, as I said, for M&S, an old established British business over 130 years. Guess what? If this was a person, think of that person that you're dealing with. They've done things the same way. They were born here. They've seen all these changes. They don't like all of these changes. But actually, if this old lady of the UK, I can't say high street anymore because the online business, but if we want to survive, then we absolutely recognise that we cannot hold on to all of those things that we used to. And as I said, I'm not here as a apologist for M&S being, but I'm here to say 2.5 years ago when they persuaded me, and it was a big persuasion piece, I've got to tell you, to come and help them change that culture. And, you know, cultural change does not happen overnight. This is it's not something that you just tell HR, we want to be diverse and we want to be inclusive, and it happens. It's a real transformation of a business. So culturally, you know, this is a big thing that we're taking on. And I don't think anybody can underestimate. And, you know, Klarna, you know, when you're 130 years old, you may be facing some issues that aren't here for you today. But yes, it's...
Yeah.
I think it's a brilliant analogy, but and I think is that there'll be lots of people probably watching this. They're in similar roles in organisations that, you know, have been persuaded to go. It's a business that's going through change. So how do you, in your role, you know, take on that opportunity to really drive change?
Well, a bit like Tam was saying, you know, you've got to be yourself. I rock up at M&S. And believe me, there aren't too many people at M&S that look like me. The one thing I'm clear on is I've got to be me, and I've got to be me so that people coming... I've never seen myself as a role model, actually, but people made me aware of me rocking up at M&S, not in a suit, not wearing a shirt and tie, with my hair the way that it is a bit of a statement. And the thing that I have to hold on to is being that person who's being themselves and giving license for everybody else to be themselves and bring their whole self to work, to help. And the way that I look at it is I am, and people like me, not they have to look like me, but people who think like me, to have the courage to be yourself in the work environment and help M&S into this new space that it needs to occupy. And to be fair, you know, when I took the job, I thought they're not going to be able to deal with this, and I gave myself 6 months. 2.5 years later, I'm there, and there are more people like me in the business joining. There's a very different conversation happening now, and sorry, not because of me, but because of the decision when that was made that they needed people like me. So the organisation definitely recognises that it has to do this change, and this change is happening.
And I think that idea of role models can't be underestimated, can it, in terms of young people coming through, seeing people in roles that they want to be in, knowing that there's a pathway through. Is that, Tan, you've been a trailblazer in lots of ways in your career, is that... tell me a bit about sort of how you feel sort of you can empower young people, but also is that maybe how the fashion industry could play a role in empowering people to be themselves?
Yeah, when I was offered the job to be on Queer Eye, I didn't actually audition like most people do. I didn't try to be in this industry for years. But when I was offered the job, I was so hesitant to take it because there weren't many people like me on TV. I know there are a few people in the UK who have done a great job of representing Asians on TV, but in the US that wasn't the case and hasn't been the case. And so it was an incredibly daunting proposition for me, and I didn't know if I could do it. But now I'm so glad I am in this position, because just me being myself, as Wes was saying, just him being himself, that means something to his business. That is, whether he accepts it or not, that is what is encouraging the organization to offer more diversity within the office, because they see probably how wonderful Wes is doing his job. It could be done by somebody other than a Caucasian person, and that's exactly how I feel with my job and with anything I do within the fashion space also. Why wouldn't you use me for an editorial spread instead of another reality star in the US? Just because they're white doesn't mean it makes more sense for them. You're going to sell more magazines, maybe you will, but it would encourage your readers to see our people as just as valuable. And so that's what it means to me when I do my job every day, whether it be on camera or on a red carpet. It reminds the audience that there are other people out there who can do just as good of a job, if not better, than anybody else I've seen before, and why not use them, and why not work with them instead of just the regular Caucasian person or the regular Chris that you would always work with. Fashion is a difficult one because I think most companies are scared to embrace something other than the Caucasian way because that's how it's been done for so long. I would love to believe that there's a future that's a lot more diverse. In the UK in particular, there are so many people of colour. It's a shame that that's not reflected on the red carpet, in magazines, on the runway. Again, yes, there are some African Americans or black people that have been at the forefront of fashion for quite some time in the UK. But again, there are other options that aren't being explored, and we represent a massive sector of the UK population.
Can I ask who your role models were when you were coming through?
You
Who
know,
did you look to?
It's a question I get quite a lot, and I always feel like a douche when I say this, and relatively arrogant when I say there weren't any people. That's why I desperately felt like I needed to do this job. I didn't want to be in show business. I had retired. I was real good, never working again. But there weren't people, and I felt so alone as a kid. Yes, there were gay people on TV that were usually played by straight people. Yes, there were some people of color, but they weren't Pakistani. They weren't immigrants. I never felt like we were truly represented. And when you really break this up, just because somebody's gay on TV doesn't mean that they represent me. Being white and gay is so different from being a person of color and being gay, or being a person of color and being straight is so different to being a person of color and being gay. And so I didn't feel like there were any role models that I could really look to say, this is what can be achieved. That's why I felt so alone. And that's why I hope that what I do for a living, whether I'm pushing for it or not, does encourage people to feel less alone and that their story matters, that people actually care and want to hear it.
So great message is that if you haven't got a role model, is be the role model, is that go out there and do it and then send the ladder back for others coming through.
Yeah, I will add a caveat to that. There is so much pressure that comes along with it, and there's a lot of negativity towards you for it. But if you're strong enough to deal with it, it's worth the heartache that you go through.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that thank you for doing that and see you as a role model to push forward. David, I'd like to come to you to pick up on one of the things that Tam was saying, which is really around sort of how the fashion industry maybe could play a role in change. Do you think it really can? Is that obviously we reach a huge amount of people, is that we talk about sort of, the cultural zeitgeist of fashion, can it play a key role in terms of societal change when it comes to things like diversity and representation?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and I think you almost answered the question yourself. I do think if you look at fashion, we have to realize that it's one of probably the strongest platforms around. I mean, fashion is pop culture, and pop culture sets all the trends right now. We know that, how strong pop culture is and how strongly fashion influences pop culture. And trends basically define an era. So I do think we have to realize that fashion, and we work with a lot of fashion retailers and fashion brands, that fashion is one of the strongest platforms around to define this era that we live in. And sometimes it might seem shallow to only talk about what kind of models we use or the representation on the red carpet. But I do think at the end of the day, even those things really make a change. Although at the end of the day, I do think like we have to look beyond the models and the representation to how does it look from an employee perspective? How does it look from an ownership perspective? That is then really gonna like push diversion and inclusion forward, I do think. But I mean, fashion is, in my opinion, fashion, Hollywood, and music are the three strongest platforms in order to affect pop culture. And whoever can affect pop culture is going to affect the times we live in.
Fantastic.
Can I add one last thing and I'll make it so quick, I
go
promise.
for it.
But when I agree with you completely, David, I truly do. But also to lay on one more point, I think it comes down to a lot of it when we're talking about people we see on the red carpet and in magazines, the models on the runway. I think that up until this point, it is the reason why we've seen so many Caucasian people on those runways is because that is what we've been told is sexy. That is what's beautiful. And fashion is sexy. Sex sells, and that's what fashion is all about on that runway. What's the sexiest thing? What's the sexiest brand right now? Who wants to wear that thing? And when you see only Caucasian people on that runway, that's suggesting that there's only one version of what it is to be sexy, and that's white. And I think that's where the major problem lies when it comes to runways and magazines and fashion itself, is that we're being told that there's only one version of sexy, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
Fantastically said.
And can I just add to that? One interesting thing that we're seeing is the profound effect that China is having on all of this. Because China is, like, at the moment, probably the by far biggest revenue streams for almost all the luxury fashion brands. And what we can see there is that the Caucasian sexiness that you're talking about, Tan, actually doesn't hold true there. Like, that is not their definition of sexy per se. So the profound impact China has had, I think, on the start of inclusion, I think it's a really interesting development we're seeing there. When the biggest spending region in the world starts saying no to the Caucasian models.
Well, there you go. There are so many reasons why now is the moment for change. I can't believe that we're out of time already, as that was the quickest 25 minutes ever. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for contributing to this discussion. This is literally just the start. There is so much work to be done in the fashion industry. But thank you all for playing your part. Thank you for being here today. And thank you, the team at GQ Heroes.